The war ended 6 months later with the surrender of the Drekari Empire. Their fleets were broken, their worlds were occupied, and their leaders had fled to distant corners of the galaxy. Queen Salith had won a victory that would be remembered for generations. But she knew that the true cost of war was measured in lives, not territory, and she had lost far too many of her people. The peace negotiations were held on Keth Prime, in the same palace where Daniel had spent the past year learning about Corvani culture. Ambassadors from a dozen species gathered to witness the surrender and to discuss the future of the region. Among them was Ambassador Lisa Grant, who had watched Daniel's journey with a mixture of concern and admiration. Daniel was not involved in the negotiations. He spent his days walking through the palace gardens, thinking about everything that had happened and everything that was still to come. He had changed during his time among the Corvani. He had seen things that few humans would ever see. He had learned things that would stay with him forever. But he still wanted to go home. The summons came on the day the peace treaty was signed. Daniel was brought to the grand chamber of the Eternal Court, a vast hall that could hold 10,000 beings. It was filled to capacity. Nobles, officials, ambassadors, and representatives from across the galaxy had gathered to witness something important. Daniel did not know what. He walked down the central aisle toward the throne where Queen Salith sat in her ceremonial robes. Her carapace gleamed with the silver markings of her rank, and her golden eyes watched him with an intensity that made his heart beat faster. He stopped at the proper distance and bowed as he had been taught. "Daniel Cole," Salith announced, her voice amplified so that all could hear. "You stand before this court to receive judgment on the matter of the life debt you hold over me. 1 year ago, you saved my life without expectation of reward. You asked for nothing. You demanded nothing. You simply acted because you believed it was right." The chamber was silent. Every eye was on Daniel and the Queen. "The life debt is sacred law among my people," Salith continued. "It demands that I repay what you gave me. But how does one repay a gift that was freely given? How does one balance a scale when one side asks for nothing?" She rose from her throne and descended the steps to stand before him. They were close enough to touch, close enough that Daniel could see the subtle colors shifting in her carapace. "I have thought about this question for many months. I have consulted with advisors and scholars and priests. I have searched the histories of my people for guidance. And I have come to a conclusion that many in this chamber will not understand." Salith raised her voice again so that all could hear. "The only way to truly repay a gift given freely is to offer the same in return. Daniel Cole, I offer you a position as Royal Advisor on Human Affairs. I offer you a seat on my inner council. I offer you recognition as a protected member of the royal household, with all the rights and privileges that entails. I offer you my protection, my resources, and my trust." The chamber erupted in noise. Shouts of protest came from traditional nobles who could not accept a human in such a position. Murmurs of confusion came from those who did not understand. Consort Prangetic looked like he wanted to kill someone. General Vithros stood rigid with shock. Salith let the noise continue for a moment, then raised her hand for silence. "I make this offer with no expectation that Daniel Cole will accept. That is the point. Just as he gave to me without demanding anything in return, I give to him without demanding anything in return. He may refuse and return to his ship with his accounts filled with wealth and his freedom restored. He may accept and help me build something new between our peoples. The choice is his alone." She turned to face Daniel directly, and her voice became softer. "You taught me that there are ways of connecting with others that do not depend on power or obligation. You showed me that trust can exist without transaction. I am trying to learn from that lesson. Whatever you decide, know that you have changed me. You have changed how I think about leadership and empire and the meaning of service. Daniel stood in silence, aware that the entire galaxy was watching. He thought about his ship, the Dusty Sparrow, waiting for him in the royal hangar. He thought about the stars he had explored and the freedom he had cherished. He thought about the life he had known before all of this began. Then he thought about what he had seen and learned during his time among the Kovani. He thought about the possibility of building bridges between species that had never truly understood each other. He thought about what it would mean if the values he believed in could spread beyond humanity, could change how other civilizations treated each other and their own people. "I accept," he said. More noise erupted from the chamber, but Salith silenced it with a gesture. "You understand what this means?" she asked. "You will be far from your people, living among aliens who may never fully accept you. You will face dangers and challenges beyond anything you have known. You will never return to the simple life of a cargo pilot." "I understand," Daniel said, "but I have a condition." Salith almost smiled. "You and your conditions. Speak." "My ship stays with me. The Dusty Sparrow has been my home for years. I will not give her up, even for a palace." "Agreed," Salith said without hesitation. "Your ship will have a permanent place in the royal hangar. You may fly her whenever you wish." She extended one of her 4 hands toward him. It was a gesture of welcome, one that Daniel had learned during his time on Keth Prime. He took her hand in his, and the chamber fell completely silent. "Then it is done," Salith announced. Daniel Cole is now a member of this court, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. Let no one challenge his place here. The formal ceremony continued for another hour, but Daniel barely noticed. His mind was still processing what had just happened. He had come to this planet as a reluctant prisoner and was leaving as an advisor to the most powerful ruler in the sector. Later that evening, Ambassador Grant found him in the hangar, standing beside the Dusty Sparrow. His ship looked small and battered compared to the sleek Kovani vessels around it, but it was still the most beautiful thing he had ever owned. "Congratulations," the ambassador said. "You have done something remarkable." "I am not sure what I have done," Daniel admitted. "I just stopped to help someone who needed help. Everything else happened on its own." "That is exactly what makes it remarkable," Grant said. "You showed an alien queen that humans are worth trusting. You demonstrated our values in ways that speeches and treaties never could. You may have changed the future of relations between our species." Daniel looked at his ship and smiled. "I am still just a cargo pilot at heart. I still do not understand politics or diplomacy or any of this royal business." "Perhaps that is why it worked," Grant said. "You did not try to be anything other than what you are, and that was enough." She left him alone with his thoughts. Daniel climbed into the cockpit of the Dusty Sparrow and sat in the pilot's seat where he had sat 1,000 times before. The controls were familiar under his hands. The smell of the ship was like coming home. He thought about the day he had seen the crash on Berth 7. He could have walked away. He could have let someone else handle it. He could have decided that it was not his problem. Instead, he had run toward the fire. That one decision had changed everything. It had brought him to this moment, sitting in his ship in a royal hangar on an alien world, preparing for a future he could never have imagined. All because he had believed that helping someone in need was simply the right thing to do. The galaxy was vast and strange and filled with beings who thought in ways humans could barely understand. But Daniel had learned something important during his time among the Kovani. He had learned that kindness was a language that did not need translation. He had learned that compassion could bridge gaps that weapons and treaties could not. He had learned that sometimes being human was enough. Daniel powered up the Dusty Sparrow systems and listened to the familiar hum of her engines. Tomorrow, he would begin his new life as a royal advisor. There would be challenges and dangers and moments when he questioned his decision. But tonight, he was just a pilot sitting in his ship, grateful to be alive and ready for whatever came next. The war came faster than anyone expected. The Drakari Empire launched a massive invasion across the Kovani frontier, attacking a dozen worlds simultaneously. Their fleets were vast, their soldiers were fierce, and their hatred of Queen Salith was absolute. They were the same faction that had funded the assassination attempt, and now they sought to finish what they had started. Daniel watched the war reports from his quarters in the palace. He saw images of burning cities and destroyed ships. He heard numbers that represented millions of lives lost. And he felt useless, trapped in luxury while others fought and died. He went to Queen Salith with a request. "I want to help," he said. "I cannot sit here doing nothing while war rages across your empire." Salith studied him with those golden eyes that had become familiar over the past months. "You are under my protection. If you die, the life debt dies with you. I would have failed my obligation. Your people are dying every day," Daniel argued. "I have medical training. I can save lives. That should matter more than any obligation." The queen was silent for a long moment. Then she made a sound that might have been a sigh. "You continue to surprise me, Daniel Cole. Most beings would use the life debt as an excuse to stay safe. You use it as an argument to risk yourself." She raised one of her 4 hands in a gesture of acceptance. "Very well. I will assign you to a medical frigate. You will serve where your skills can do the most good." Daniel was sent to the front lines. The medical frigate Hope of Keth was a converted transport ship filled with doctors, nurses, and the wounded soldiers they struggled to save. The crew was entirely Corvani, and they viewed their new human colleague with suspicion and doubt. But Daniel did not care about their opinions. He cared about the patients. His training as an emergency medical technician proved more valuable than anyone expected. Human medicine and Corvani medicine had developed along different paths, and Daniel knew techniques that the alien doctors had never seen. He showed them new ways to stop bleeding, new methods for treating shock, and new approaches to keeping patients alive long enough for proper treatment. Slowly, the crew's suspicion turned to respect. The battle for Vareth 7 came 3 months into the war. The same planet where Daniel had first saved Queen Salith was now a key strategic position. Both sides threw everything they had into the fight, and the skies above the dusty world burned with energy weapons and dying ships. The Hope of Keth was hit during the worst of the fighting. An enemy missile struck the engine section, and the frigate began falling toward the planet below. Daniel helped organize the evacuation, making sure wounded patients reached the escape pods before the crew. When the ship finally crashed, only a handful of people were still aboard. Daniel survived the impact through pure luck. He crawled from the wreckage into a landscape of destruction. The crash site was in the middle of a combat zone, with Corvani and Drakari forces fighting all around. Bodies lay everywhere, and the sound of weapons fire filled the air. He found other survivors from the Hope of Keth. He found Corvani soldiers separated from their units. He found Drakari wounded who had been left behind by their retreating comrades. He even found a small group of humans, traders who had been trapped on the planet when the invasion began. Daniel gathered them all together. "I do not care what species you are," he told them. "I do not care which side you fight for. Right now, we are all just people trying to survive. If you can fight, help me protect the wounded. If you cannot fight, help me treat the injured. We live or die together." It was a strange group that followed him through the ruins of Vareth 7. Corvani warriors fought alongside human traders. Drakari wounded received treatment from the same medics who had been trying to kill them hours before. Species that had been enemies for generations worked together because one human refused to see them as anything other than people who needed help. They established a makeshift hospital in the basement of a destroyed building. Daniel worked without rest, treating wounds and organizing supplies and keeping everyone calm when the fighting came too close. His hands were covered in blood of 3 different colors, and his body screamed for sleep, but he did not stop. Word of the unusual situation reached both command structures. The Kovani generals were confused. The Drakari commanders were outraged, but neither could send forces to deal with it because the battle was too intense. Queen Salith received a different kind of report. Her intelligence officers told her that Daniel Cole had survived the crash and was now leading a mixed group of survivors in the middle of a war zone. He was treating enemy wounded. He was protecting those who could not protect themselves. He was demonstrating the very principles he had described to her in their conversations. She made a decision that her generals would never understand. "Divert my personal guard to his position," she ordered. "Extract him and everyone under his protection." "My queen," General Vithros protested, "we cannot spare forces for one human during a critical battle." "You can and you will," Salith said. Her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "This is not a debate." The Royal Guard arrived at the makeshift hospital like angels of death. They cut through Drakari forces without mercy, creating a safe corridor to the landing zone. Daniel watched in amazement as the elite soldiers of the Empire risked their lives to rescue him and his unlikely group of survivors. He was brought before Queen Salith aboard the Eternal Throne as the battle for Vareth 7 reached its conclusion. The Kovani forces were winning, but the cost had been terrible. Daniel stood before her, covered in dirt and blood, exhausted beyond words. "I'm sorry," he said. "I caused you trouble." Salith rose from her throne and walked down to stand before him. She was tall, and he had to look up to meet her eyes. "You caused me far more than trouble," she said. "You showed my officers something they had never seen. You showed them that enemies can become allies. You showed them that compassion does not make a person weak. You showed them that there are values worth fighting for beyond territory and power." "I just did what seemed right," Daniel said. "Yes," Salith replied. "That is exactly the point. You did not calculate advantage or measure cost. You saw people in need and you helped them. Kovani, Drakari, human, it did not matter. They were people, and you helped them." She turned to face General Vithros and the other officers who had gathered. "I have spent 60 years ruling through strength and fear and political calculation. I won battles, and I crushed rebellions, and I kept my empire together through force of will. But I never inspired loyalty like what I saw today." Daniel Cole had no authority, no army, no power. He had only his principles. And beings from 3 different species followed him because they believed in what he represented. She turned back to Daniel. "The war is not over. The Drakari will regroup and attack again. But something has changed, and you are the cause of it. The question of what to do with you has become more complicated than ever." Daniel was too tired to think clearly. "What do you mean?" "I mean that you have shown me a different way to lead. A way based on compassion rather than fear. I do not know if it can work for an empire as large as mine, but I want to find out." She paused. "And that means I cannot simply release you when this war ends. You have become too valuable, too important." Daniel felt a chill despite his exhaustion. "You are going to keep me prisoner forever." "No," Salith said. "I am going to offer you something far more complicated than imprisonment. But that discussion can wait until you have rested." She gestured, and servants came to lead Daniel away. As he left, he looked back at the Queen one last time. She was watching him with an expression he had never seen on her face before. It almost looked like hope. The Kovani throne world was called Keth Prime, and it was unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. The planet was covered in vast cities of crystalline towers that caught the light of twin suns and scattered rainbows across the sky. Gardens of living plants grew on every surface, tended by millions of workers who saw such beauty as essential to civilized life. The royal palace rose above everything else, a structure so tall that its upper levels disappeared into the clouds. Daniel felt like an insect himself as he walked through halls, designed for beings taller and grander than humans. His quarters were comfortable but isolated, and he spent his first days on Keth Prime learning the basics of Corvani culture from servants who clearly viewed him as a curiosity. The news of his presence spread quickly. A human holding life debt status over the Queen was unprecedented in the long history of the Empire. Some viewed it as a scandal. Others saw it as an insult to Corvani pride. A few were simply confused about why their ruler would honor such an obligation to an alien from a minor species. Ambassador Lisa Grant arrived within a week. She was the human diplomatic envoy to the Corvani Empire, a sharp woman with gray hair and tired eyes who had spent 20 years navigating alien politics. She found Daniel in the palace gardens and sat beside him on a bench made of polished stone. "Do you have any idea what you have done?" she asked. "I saved someone who needed saving," Daniel said. "I did not expect all of this." "The Corvani do not give life debts lightly," the ambassador explained. "The last time a queen invoked this law was 300 years ago. It bound two noble houses together for generations. You are now tied to the most powerful person in this sector of space." "I have asked to be released," Daniel said. She refused. Ambassador Grant sighed. "Of course she did. The political implications of releasing you would be worse than keeping you. If she breaks the life debt, she looks weak. If she honors it, she looks strange for honoring it with a human. She has trapped herself as much as you." Daniel had not considered this. He looked across the garden at the alien flowers that bloomed in colors humans had no names for. "What should I do?" "Be careful," the ambassador said. "Be polite. Do not make enemies. And for the sake of all humanity, do not cause an incident that could damage relations between our species." This proved to be more difficult than Daniel expected. Corvani culture was filled with rules he did not understand. The way he walked was wrong. The way he ate was wrong. The way he looked at people was wrong. Every day brought new mistakes and new embarrassments. The court laughed at him behind his back. Some laughed to his face. A human trying to navigate Corvani society was like a child trying to play adult games. He did not know the rules, and no one was eager to teach him. One person watched his struggles with particular interest. Consort Prime Jethic was a male Corvani with a carapace of pale gold and eyes like black diamonds. He held no official power, but everyone knew he was Queen Salith's greatest rival within the court. He had wanted the throne for himself and had spent decades building alliances to challenge her rule. Jethic approached Daniel one evening in a quiet corridor of the palace. His voice was smooth and friendly, but something in his manner made Daniel uneasy. "You must find this all very overwhelming," Jethic said. "A simple cargo pilot thrust into the heart of an alien empire. It cannot be easy. It has been challenging," Daniel admitted. "I can help you," Jethic offered. "I have friends who could arrange your escape. You could return to your ship and your old life. The Queen would not be able to stop you without losing face." Daniel considered the offer. It was tempting. He missed his ship and his freedom. But something about Jethic's eagerness made him suspicious. "What would you want in return?" Daniel asked. "Nothing significant. Just some information about human military capabilities. Fleet numbers, weapon systems, defensive positions. Things that any cargo pilot might have observed during his travels." Daniel understood immediately. Jethic was not trying to help him. He was trying to use him. The information he wanted could be used against humanity or sold to enemies of the Empire. Either way, Daniel would be a traitor to his own kind. "No," Daniel said. Jethic's friendly expression flickered. "Think carefully. This may be your only chance to leave this place." "I will take my chances with the Queen," Daniel said. "At least she has been honest about her intentions." He walked away before Jethic could say more. He did not see the cold anger that passed across the Consort Prime's face, but he felt it like a weight on his back. What Daniel did not know was that Queen Salith had been watching. Hidden sensors throughout the palace recorded everything, and she had made a habit of observing her unusual human guest. She saw the conversation with Jethic. She saw Daniel refuse the offer. She saw him choose loyalty over freedom. The next day, she summoned him to her private chambers. Her rooms were vast and beautiful, filled with art and treasures from across the Empire. Salith sat on a throne of living crystal that pulsed with soft light. She gestured for Daniel to sit on a cushion before her, and he did so awkwardly. "You refused Jethic's offer," she said. Daniel was not surprised that she knew. "He wanted me to betray my people. That was never going to happen, even though it meant staying here against your will." "Some things matter more than personal freedom," Daniel said. "My people trust me to represent them well, even if I'm just a cargo pilot. I will not sell that trust for an easy escape." Salith leaned forward, her golden eyes studying him with that same intense curiosity he had seen on the first day. "Tell me more about this concept," she said. "This idea of trust and loyalty that does not depend on power or payment. Among my kind, such things are always transactional. We are loyal because loyalty brings advantage. We trust because trust is useful. What you describe sounds different." Daniel thought about how to explain. Humans form bonds that go beyond usefulness. We care about people even when they cannot help us. We stay loyal even when it costs us something. We call it love or friendship or duty. It is part of what makes us human. And you feel such bonds toward people you have never met? Toward all of humanity? In a way, yes. I am part of something larger than myself. My choices reflect on my species. I want humans to be seen as trustworthy and honorable, so I try to be trustworthy and honorable." Salith was silent for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was softer than before. "I have ruled this empire for 60 years. I have faced wars and rebellions and assassination attempts. I have trusted no one completely because trust is dangerous for someone in my position. But watching you refuse Jethic, watching you choose principle over self-interest, I find myself wondering if I have been wrong." "About what?" Daniel asked. "About everything," she said. "About how society should function. About what holds people together. About whether there is a better way to live than the constant calculation of advantage and threat." She stood and walked to a window that overlooked the vast city below. "War is coming," she said. "The faction that tried to kill me will try again. They have allies in other empires, and they will not rest until I am dead and my empire is divided among them. I must prepare for this war, and I must decide what kind of ruler I want to be." She turned back to face Daniel. "You have given me much to think about." Daniel Cole, more than you know. Daniel did not fully understand what she meant, but he sensed that something important had shifted between them. The suspicious queen, who had questioned his every motive, was beginning to see him as something other than a threat. It was, he realized, the beginning of trust. Queen Salith did not trust Daniel Cole. She made this very clear in the hours that followed her awakening. Despite her injuries, she pushed herself up from the medical cot and demanded answers. Who was he working for? What faction had hired him? What did he expect to gain from saving her life? Daniel answered each question as simply as he could. He worked for himself. No faction had hired him. He expected nothing. He had seen a crashed ship and someone who needed help, so he helped. Salith did not believe him. "Among my kind," she said, "every action has purpose. Every gift demands payment. Every favor creates obligation. You claim to have risked your life for nothing. This is not possible." Daniel shrugged. "Maybe things work differently where I come from." He guided his ship through the asteroid field while Salith watched him with suspicious eyes. The Dusty Sparrow was small and quick, and Daniel knew how to navigate dangerous spaces. He had spent years flying through places where one wrong move meant death. An asteroid field was just another obstacle to overcome. "Tell me about your kind," Salith said. "Tell me about humans." Daniel thought about how to answer. "We are young compared to your species. We have only been traveling between stars for about 200 years. We come from a planet called Earth, which is far from here. We are curious and stubborn and sometimes foolish. We make mistakes and try to learn from them. We are not the strongest or smartest species in the galaxy, but we keep trying anyway." "And you help strangers," Salith said, "even when there is no benefit." "Some of us do," Daniel said. "Not all, but some. On Earth, we have people who run into burning buildings to save others. We have people who spend their lives caring for the sick without asking for payment. We have people who give food to those who are hungry and shelter to those who have nowhere to sleep. We call it compassion, or kindness, or just doing the right thing." Salith was quiet for a long time. Daniel could not read the expressions on her alien face, but something in her posture suggested deep thought. Finally, she spoke again. "I have ruled my empire for 60 years. I have studied diplomacy and war and economics and politics. I have negotiated with 100 different species, but I have never encountered this concept in practice. Your words sound like weakness, yet you do not seem weak." "Helping others is not weakness," Daniel said. "It takes strength to care about someone other than yourself." The conversation was interrupted by a signal on the communication array. Daniel tensed, fearing that the assassins had found them. But the signal carried Corvani royal codes, and Salith recognized them immediately. "My fleet," she said. "They are searching for me." Daniel hesitated. If he contacted the Corvani fleet, his involvement in this situation would become official. He would have to explain why he had the Queen aboard his ship. He might face questions or accusations or worse. The smart thing would be to drop her somewhere safe and disappear. But Salith was still injured, and assassins were still looking for her. Disappearing would mean leaving her in danger. Daniel could not do that. He opened the communication channel. Within hours, the sky filled with Corvani warships. They were massive vessels of curved metal and glowing energy, and they moved through space like predators hunting prey. The largest of them, the flagship Eternal Throne, was bigger than any human ship Daniel had ever seen. A shuttle came to collect the Queen. Daniel expected to be dismissed at this point. He had done his part, and now he would return to his ordinary life. But Salith had other plans. "You will come with me," she said. "That is not necessary," Daniel replied. "You are safe now. I should get back to my work. It is not a request." Armed guards surrounded Daniel and escorted him onto the shuttle. His ship was taken aboard the flagship, and he found himself standing in a vast hangar filled with Corvani soldiers. They all stared at him with expressions he could not interpret. He felt very small and very alone. A tall Corvani in military armor approached. His carapace was dark red, and his eyes were cold. "I am General Vithros," he said, "commander of the royal fleet. You are the human who found the Queen?" "I am," Daniel said. "My name is Daniel Cole. Why did you save her?" Daniel sighed. He was getting tired of this question. "Because she needed help." General Vithros stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned to Queen Salith, who had been treated by royal physicians and now stood tall despite her bandages. "My queen," the general said, "this human should be questioned and released. His involvement appears to be coincidental. There is no reason to keep him here." Salith raised one of her 4 hands, and the general fell silent. "Daniel Cole saved my life," she said. "He carried me from the fire. He protected me from assassins. He treated my wounds with his own hands. And when I asked him why, he said it was simply the right thing to do." "An unlikely story," General Vithros said. "Perhaps, but I believe him." Salith turned to face the assembled soldiers and officers. Her voice rose so that all could hear. "I invoke the ancient law of life debt. This human is bound to me until I can repay what he has given. His life is under my protection. His honor is my honor. Any who harm him answer to me." The hangar erupted in whispers and gasps. General Vithros looked like he wanted to protest but held his tongue. Daniel stood in confusion, not fully understanding what had just happened. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "I do not want payment. I do not want to be bound to anyone. I just want to go back to my ship and continue my life." Salith turned to him, and something like curiosity flickered in her golden eyes. "You refuse reward? You reject connection to the throne? Most beings in this galaxy would kill for what I offer." "I am not most beings," Daniel said. "I am just a cargo pilot who happened to be in the right place at the right time." Salith studied him in silence. Then she made a sound that might have been laughter. "This is exactly why you cannot leave," she said. "I have never met anyone like you, Daniel Cole. I must understand why you are the way you are. Until I do, you remain under my protection and my observation." Daniel opened his mouth to argue, but the look in her eyes stopped him. She was a queen who ruled 40 star systems. She was not accustomed to being told no. And despite everything, there was genuine curiosity in her gaze. She truly wanted to understand him. He realized that his life had just changed forever. "Fine," he said. "But I have conditions." "Conditions?" General Vithros sounded outraged. "You dare make demands of the Queen?" "It is acceptable," Salith said. "Speak your conditions, human." Daniel took a deep breath. "First, I want access to my ship. Second, I want to be treated with respect, not as a prisoner. Third, when you finally understand whatever it is you want to understand, you let me go without complications." Salith considered his words. Then she nodded. "Your conditions are reasonable. I accept them." She turned to General Vithros. "See that his ship is maintained and that he is given proper quarters. He's a guest of the crown, not a captive." The general bowed, though his expression showed clear displeasure as Daniel was led away to his new quarters. He looked back at the queen one last time. She was watching him with those golden eyes, and he could not shake the feeling that his simple act of kindness had set something much larger in motion. He had no idea how right he was. The frontier planet Vera 7 was not a beautiful place. It was a dusty world of rocky plains and thin air where traders from 100 different species came to do business. The trading post sat on the edge of Corvani Empire space, and it served as a meeting point between human colonies and alien territories. Daniel Cole had been coming here for 3 years, and he knew every corner of the place. Daniel was 34 years old, and had spent the last decade flying cargo between star systems. He owned a small freighter called the Dusty Sparrow, and he made a modest living hauling goods that larger companies did not want to bother with. Before becoming a pilot, he had worked as an emergency medical technician on Earth. He had left that life behind when the stars called to him, but he never forgot his training. Some skills stayed with a person forever. On this particular day, Daniel had landed his ship for routine repairs. The Dusty Sparrow was getting old, and her engines needed constant attention. He stood outside the repair dock, drinking bitter coffee and watching the sky as other ships came and went. The trading post was busy as always, with aliens of every shape and size moving through the dusty streets. That was when the explosion happened. A Kovani diplomatic shuttle was coming down through the atmosphere when something went wrong. Fire erupted from its engines, and the elegant vessel began spinning out of control. Daniel watched in horror as it crashed into the landing field less than 200 meters from where he stood. The impact sent a wave of heat and debris across the area, and people began running in every direction. Daniel did not run away. He ran toward the wreckage. Other traders shouted at him to stop. They warned him that the ship might explode again, or that whatever had caused the crash might still be dangerous. Daniel ignored them all. He could see movement inside the burning vessel, and that meant someone was still alive. The heat was intense as he approached the shuttle. The Kovani built their ships from materials that burned with strange colors, and the flames around him shifted from orange to purple to green. Daniel covered his face with his jacket and pushed through a gap in the twisted metal. Inside, he found death. The pilot was gone, and 2 guards in ceremonial armor had not survived the impact. But in the back of the shuttle, strapped into a seat that had protected her from the worst of the crash, was a female Kovani. She was unconscious and bleeding from wounds on her head and arms. The Kovani were insectoid beings that resembled elegant mantis creatures from Earth. They stood taller than humans, with 4 arms and large eyes that reflected light like gemstones. Their bodies were covered in hard carapaces that could be any color from deep black to bright gold. This female had a carapace of deep purple with silver markings, and even in her injured state, there was something regal about her. Daniel did not care about any of that. He saw a person who needed help, and that was enough. He released the straps holding her in place and lifted her over his shoulder. She was heavier than she looked, but fear gave him strength. He carried her out of the shuttle just as the flames began spreading to the fuel compartment. The explosion that followed knocked him off his feet, but he managed to shield her body with his own. When Daniel looked up, he saw figures approaching through the smoke. They were not rescue workers. They moved with purpose and carried weapons, and they were heading straight toward him and the unconscious female. Assassins. The crash had not been an accident. Daniel did not have time to think. He grabbed the female and dragged her toward the nearest cover, which happened to be a stack of cargo containers. The assassins opened fire, and energy bolts struck the metal around him. He kept moving, his heart pounding in his chest. The Dusty Sparrow was 50 meters away. If he could reach his ship, he could get them both to safety. Daniel lifted the female again and ran. His muscles screamed in protest, and the thin air of Vara 7 made every breath painful. But he did not stop. He reached his ship and slammed his hand against the entry panel. The door opened, and he stumbled inside with his burden. He hit the emergency seal, and the door closed just as more energy bolts struck the hull. Daniel did not waste time catching his breath. He dropped the female onto his medical cot and ran to the cockpit. The Dusty Sparrow was old, but she was fast when she needed to be. Daniel fired the engines and lifted off while the assassins were still shooting at him. He pushed the ship hard, climbing through the atmosphere until the blue sky turned black and the stars appeared around him. Only then did he allow himself to breathe. Daniel set a course for the asteroid field near the planet. He could hide there while he figured out what to do next. Then he went back to check on the female he had rescued. She was still unconscious, but her breathing was stable. Daniel used his old medical training to treat her wounds. He cleaned the cuts on her head and arms, applied bandages, and gave her fluids through an injection port he found on her lower arm. The Kovani were different from humans in many ways, but their basic biology was similar enough that he could help her as he worked. Daniel noticed something strange. The silver markings on her carapace were not random patterns. They formed symbols that seemed to repeat in a specific arrangement. He had seen similar markings before on Corvani officials, but never so many or so elaborate. The female stirred and opened her eyes. They were large and golden, and they focused on Daniel with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. She tried to move, but he gently pushed her back down. "Easy," he said. "You were in a crash. You are safe now, but you need to rest." She stared at him for a long moment. Then she looked around the small medical bay of his ship. Her gaze returned to him, and when she spoke, her voice was like wind chimes in a storm. "You are human," she said. "Yes," Daniel replied. "My name is Daniel Cole. I am a cargo pilot. I pulled you from the wreckage before the ship exploded." "Why?" she asked. The question surprised him. "Because you were hurt. Because you needed help." She continued to stare at him as if he had said something impossible to understand. Then her eyes moved to his chest, where her blood had stained his shirt. She looked at his hands, which were burned from the fire. She looked at his face, which was covered in soot and sweat. "You risked your life," she said, "for a stranger. For one not of your kind." "I suppose I did," Daniel said. He had not really thought about it until now. The female was silent for a moment. Then she spoke again, and her words changed everything. "I am Salith," she said, "Queen of the Kovani Empire, ruler of 40 star systems and 300 billion souls. And you, Daniel Cole, have placed yourself in more danger than you can possibly imagine." Daniel felt his stomach drop. He looked again at the silver markings on her carapace and finally understood what they meant. He had just saved the most powerful being in this entire sector of the galaxy. And somewhere behind him, assassins were still hunting for her. "Well," he said quietly, "that certainly complicates things."